Be nice.
I don't know. Peter could be a Telly Savalas. Fedora.
Good evening, members of council, members of staff, ladies and gentlemen. Thank you very much for joining us today at this regular meeting for the Town of Pelham Council for Monday, November 3rd. I see that we have quorum, and I call this regular meeting to order. We will begin with an invocation led by Councillor King, followed by the singing of the national anthem, which will be led by Councillor Papp. And I would ask all who are able to rise.
Lord, give us this day your strength and courage to do your will. Grant that the members of Pelham Council demonstrate humility, listen with an open mind, and show wisdom in all their deliberations and matters of business placed before them. Bring to this council honor, trust, and dignity to work on behalf of all the people of the town of Pelham. Amen.
Amen.
O Canada, our home and native land, true patron of, in all thy sons command, with glowing hearts we see thee rise, the true north, strong and free. From far and wide, O Canada, we stand on guard for thee. God keep our land, glorious and free. O Canada, we stand on guard for thee. O Canada, we stand on guard for thee.
Thank you, Councillor King. Thank you, Councillor Papp, and all members of council and those that joined in singing. Thank you. First, we have approval of the agenda. It has been moved by Councillor Durley, seconded by Councillor Lane, that the agenda for the November 3rd, 2014 regular meeting of council be adopted. Are there any changes to the agenda? Councillor Papp.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I would request that item under staff reports 13.2.3, the request for a temporary use of a dwelling while a replacement dwelling is constructed, be moved up under section 9, right after under business arising from council minutes.
Okay, thank you. We'll move it up to after section 9.
Yep. So it'd be, I guess,
10.
item 9.1.
Okay.
If that's
Is there a second
agreeable
for that? Councillor Kersey. All those in favor of the amendment? Any opposed? That motion is carried. Any other changes to the agenda? There being none, I call the question on the amended agenda. All those in favor? Any opposed? That motion is carried. The next item is disclosure of pecuniary interest. That is any conflicts of interest that any members may have. Do any members have any conflicts? Can that be noted that there are no conflicts? Thank you. Next, we move to hearings of presentations, delegations, and the regional report. There are no presentations or delegations, and there's no regional report. Regional council has been in a bit of a hiatus as well, so we'll look forward to that probably starting next term. Now we move to adoption of minutes of council. Thank you. It has been moved by Councillor King, seconded by Councillor Durley, that the following minutes be adopted as printed, circulated, and read. Minutes of the regular meeting of council of October 6th and of the, I believe it's a special meeting?
Yes, sir.
Special meeting of council of October 30th. Are there any errors or omissions in those minutes? Then I'm going to call the question. All those in favor? Any opposed? That motion is carried. Thank you. Now, as was changed in the agenda, we move to item 13.2.3, which is the request for temporary use of a dwelling while a replacement dwelling is constructed. Thank you. It's been moved by Councillor Lane, seconded by Councillor Durley. The council received the issue C request for temporary use of a dwelling while a replacement dwelling is constructed, and the council authorized the mayor and clerk to enter into a development agreement that will ensure the removal of the existing residence at 970 Effingham Street once the new home is built. Discussion?
Straightforward.
Thank you. I did have a question for Mr. Glover. When we reviewed previous situations where this occurred, I know there was one on Effingham between Cambro and Welland, on Cambro Road, just, I guess, east of Effingham, and also on Welland Road. I don't recall that this would ever come to council, and I think the instrument that was used was a committee of adjustment. Could you just fill us in on whether we could do that in the future, or do they all have to come here to council?
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I did review the past practice here, and previously, they were brought through the minor variance process through the Committee of Adjustment to vary the permissions on the site from a 1 unit to a temporary 2 unit. However, using that practice, there's no guarantee of the removal of the second dwelling except for through bylaw enforcement and the cost of the town to enforce and demolish and collect and all the other stuff. I felt through looking for best practice, other municipalities, plus the same issue that I've dealt with in other municipalities myself, with recommendation of the chief building official, that the best course of action to protect the town's interest is to have an agreement done to force the issue from a civil action, as well as hold securities to make sure we have enough money to remove the building if it doesn't get removed as per the agreement.
Okay, thank you very much for that. Is there something that can be, can this be something that council can delegate to a certain authority level? Do you know if that's been done?
Absolutely, I believe the execution of an agreement. Actually, you know what, I'll defer that to the clerk to answer, because it is whether you could delegate authority of the council signing an agreement on behalf of the town.
Madam Clerk, can you, or maybe it's something that can be looked into if you can't answer it right now.
Through you, Mr. Mayor, it is something I would like to research. We do have certain provisions in the procurement bylaw, depending on the expenditure levels, where agreements can be signed without coming to council for a bylaw, but I would like to research that before
Okay.
we decide on that.
So with council, I think, you know, and we see the proponent here, the applicant here this evening, and I know it may change, you know, to get to the council schedule, it may be something that would be worthwhile to say, let's delegate this in future, and only the, I'll say the odd ones would rise to council. So if it can be understood, Madam Clerk, if council's okay with that, that can be researched and brought back to us in the future as we approve this. Is that okay?
Yeah.
Okay?
Yep.
So are you ready for calling the question? Any other questions? There being none, I call the question. All those in favor? Any opposed? That motion is carried. Thank you. You're welcome. Thank you. Have a great evening. Now we move back to the regular agenda. And we move to consent agenda items to be considered in block. Are there any items that members of council would like to lift for separate consideration? Councillor Durley.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Item 11.1, the COW minutes, there is one clause in there that I would like to expand upon from that. It's just an amendment to a motion that was made there.
Okay, so you'd like to lift those minutes from the committee of the whole?
Yes,
Okay.
particularly the appendix 1 of that article.
Okay, so
So the recommendations.
the recommendation sheet. Okay, thank you. Any others? Thank you. It's been moved by Councillor Durley, seconded by Councillor Ribbiak, that the following consent agenda items be received and the recommendations contained there be approved as applicable. And should it also be the minutes, or I guess the minutes are the minutes, right? Councillor Durley? Is it the minutes? Is there error with the minutes?
No, it's, I want to expand upon the...
One of the recommendations?
The flooding situation in Emmett and College.
Okay. All right, thanks. So the first item, therefore, is the minutes of the Committee of the Whole of October 6th, 2014. The third item is staff reports of routine nature for information or action. There is one report regarding restricted acts after nomination day, which is also called lame duck provisions final report. And the recommendation is that the issue summary report restricted acts after nomination day provisions final report be received for the information of council. Then we have some items of correspondence of routine nature. The first is from Penn West Power Inc. Director nomination, and the recommendation is the council receive the correspondence from Penn West Power Inc. dated October 7th, 2014, and that the clerk be directed to advertise for applications for appointment to the Board of Directors of Peninsula West Power Inc. for a 3-year term. The next is applications to the Christmas in Pelham Committee, and the recommendation is the council receive the applications from Tom McIntyre and Gail Balchis Chataway for the Christmas in Pelham Committee, and the council consider the appointment bylaw presented later on this evening's agenda. The next is information from the Road 12 landfill site, municipal hazardous and special waste depot. The council received the correspondence from the Niagara Region regarding Road 12 landfill site dated October 6th, and that the mayor and clerk be authorized to enter into the amending agreement with Niagara Region. That was something that we dealt with previously. The fifth area is information correspondence items. The first is from the Ministry of Municipal Affairs and Housing, recognizing Ridgeville as a hamlet. And the second is the Enbridge Pipeline Replacement Project. And finally, committee minutes for information. There are 3 Seniors Advisory Committee minutes of September 3rd, Library Board minutes of August 27th, and Pelham Active Transportation Committee minutes of September 16th. Are there any discussion on any of those items? There being none, I call the question. All those in favor? Any opposed? That motion is carried. Councillor Durley, you wanted to raise that one item. Go ahead, sir.
It's particularly the resolution surrounding the monthly Public Works and Utilities report, which reads that staff be directed to investigate a solution to the Emmett and College Street area and other adjacent areas regarding drainage issues, including but not limited to the development of a drainage bylaw. I would like to add to that by amendment that we between the Emmett and College Street area and other adjacent areas, we add the east side of Pelham Street from Port Robinson Road to Pancake Lane. In talking to folks during the campaign, because of the slope of the land which comes down, and because of the sidewalk and the road that goes, everything drains down into the lower end, the houses, the properties that are down below that side, and they were saying that they were getting flooded in their, actually going into their garages and some into their basements and that. So if in fact we could be looking at that as well as what was mentioned in there. So I would like to move the amendment to add the words Pelham Street from Port Robinson to Merritt Road. Actually, there's some there, but particularly that other part up in front, just about across from Ed Russell's place and in there.
Yeah,
That's a very bad spot, and everything goes down. So
Okay.
they
Thank you.
certainly need some attention.
Okay, thank you, Councillor Durley. Councillor Pop, will you second that? Thank you. Any other discussion to that? I heard that as well.
So did I.
Any other discussion to that amendment? Do you have the amendment? Yes. Okay, I'm going to call the question on the amendment. All those in favor? Any opposed? That amendment carries. Anything further to the resolutions? There being none, I call the question. All those in favor? Any opposed? That resolution or recommendation sheet from October 6th is carried with amendment. Thank you. The next item is the mayor's report. Very short report, but lots here in terms of what was done. Congratulations to the Pelham Welland Chamber of Commerce for the Ruby Awards, which was held on October 17th at Lookout. Many Pelham businesses were nominated, and individuals from Pelham were nominated for the various awards. It was a great event, and the interesting part about the event, in past years they tried to make it very comedic and have different groups coming in from Brock University, etc. This time they did sort of an interview style, and almost like the red chair. So it went very well. And it was a great event. Councillor Papp was also nominated for one of the awards. So congratulations, Councillor Papp, on your nomination.
Thank you.
As for the Marianne Christoph Community Service Award, which is sponsored by Kiwanis Club of Welland. So Andrew was there, and your son. You didn't win, but it was a very difficult field. So Carolyn Fast won.
God, I thought there was a cash reward with that.
But I did want to highlight congratulations to E.L. Crosley Secondary School for winning the environmental
Yep.
award.
Yeah, they
They've
did.
done so many improvements over the years to the environment at E.L. Crosley School, and congratulations to them for their efforts on that. The next was the grand opening of Fire Station Number 3, and I know that this is in a number of committee reports. So congratulations and thanks to the members of the Pelham Fire Service and staff for helping to design this. It's a beautiful facility, and the community, when we were there, the community really appreciated that new facility. And great to hear that it's been in service already, and all the feedback I've received, Chief, is that it's the men and women in service really appreciate it, and it works very well and helps cover the community very well, so thank you. Appreciate that, and I was pleased also that Mr. Hudak was there, and the representative from Mr. Allison were there to help us with that, so thank you and congratulations. Lots of work behind that. And finally, there was a Halloween skate on October 21st, a little bit early for Halloween, but anyways, the Mayor's Youth Advisory Council helped organize that, so thank you very much. About 50 people participated. I do want to just quickly add, Council, that a number of us, Councillor Papp, Councillor Durley, Councillor Kersey, and myself were at the launch of the groundbreaking for Rinaldi Homes, which is in the first phase of the East Fawn Hill development. It's called Rosewood, and it's on Rice Road there, and it was a great ceremony of kicking that off, which is the first development of the East Fawn Hill lands. After 14 years, I'm looking at Councillor Durley and Councillor Papp because they've sat around this table the longest and were involved for a long period of time, and many staff were involved in that as well, so thank you, staff, for completing that, and Mr. CAO for helping us work through that. But it's great to see the first development of the East Fawn Hill lands moving forward, so thank you. That is my report. And we have a motion moved by Councillor Ribbiak, seconded by Councillor Durley, that my report for November 3rd, 2014 be received for information. All those in favor? Any opposed? That motion is carried. Thank you. Next, we move to the remaining staff reports requiring action. It's been moved by Councillor Lane, seconded by Councillor Durley. The Council received the issue sheet Christmas in Pelham, and that for reasons outlined in the report, Council designate Christmas in Pelham outdoor Christmas market to be held on Friday, December 5th under the arches as a municipally significant event, and that the clerk be authorized to make application for a special occasion permit for Christmas in Pelham outdoor Christmas market. And further, the council authorized the following road closure: Pelham Town Square entrance at Pelham Street to 55 meters east of Pelham Street from 12 p.m. to 12 a.m. on Friday, December 5th, 2014. Any discussion regarding this? Looking forward to another fabulous event. Hopefully the weather will be slightly warmer, so it won't be Shiverfest, I think is what Councillor Kersey called it last year. Or Councillor Durley, sorry. Anything further? There being none, I call the question. All those in favor? Any opposed? That motion is carried. Thanks to the committed volunteers and staff that are working on that. We look forward to a great Christmas in Pelham, and I think the first start of that Christmas in Pelham is coming this Wednesday. Is that not correct? Yeah, with the open houses in downtown Fawn Hill, and then followed by Ridgeville the following day. So congratulations. The next item has been moved by Councillor Kersey, second by Councillor Lane. The council received the issue summary report regarding the bylaw to establish a Heritage Pelham Advisory Committee and to provide for the appointment of members thereto for the town of Pelham, and that the bylaw to establish the Heritage Pelham Advisory Committee to provide for the appointment of members thereto for the town of Pelham and to repeal and replace bylaw 3079 2010 be brought forward to council at its November 3rd, 2014 meeting for discussion and consideration. Is that correct? Yeah. Questions, comments? Councillor Durley?
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I would like to move that we defer this and refer it back to staff, this and the actual bylaw, which appears later on. I fear that there is a conflict between the duties of an advisory committee as opposed to an action committee, and I think that this needs to be cleared up. It is an advisory committee, but a lot of the text certainly indicates that it's an active committee. I congratulate Julie Hanna for recording everything properly. We're not shooting any messenger here, but the content of it is to me in need of some refining. So if we can do that, to refer it back to a later date, no specific date, when we can get this all together and make sure that the definition of the advisory board is adhered to rather than to cross the line to action.
Okay, thank you. Is there a seconder for that? Councillor Ribbiak? And do you want to, anyone else speaking to that? Go ahead.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. There are several points, I think, in which requires at least discussion and some clear understanding on our part. I don't, if we're moving to defer it, I don't think there's any point in going into a great deal of
Okay.
detail now. So I look forward to that discussion when it finally hits the table.
Okay, thank you. I did have the chance to review the existing bylaw, and so I'd be keen to see what the differences are. I mean, I can see what they are, but the rationale for changing them. So, I appreciate the deferral motion. I'm going to call the question on actually referring it back to staff and,
And deferring it to
Deferring it
a later date to be determined.
okay, including the bylaw. Oh, Councillor Kersey?
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I'm just asking a question of procedure. Will that report then be coming back to COW? Because we seem to have a more open discussion at COW, and it might be a place to massage it and get council's input before we bring it back to council as a bylaw.
Probably makes sense to do that. So Councillor Durley, you okay with
Yes,
that?
a report from staff to committee of the
Committee of the-
whole would
committee of the
be,
whole.
I feel, very much in order.
Okay, thank you. Anyone else? There being none, I'm going to call the question. All those in favor? Any opposed? That motion is carried. Thank you. Now we move to bylaws. It's been moved by Councillor Papp, seconded by Councillor Lane, that the Council of the Town of Pelham, having given due consideration to the following bylaw, do now read a first, second, and third time, and do pass the same at the mayor and clerk be, and are hereby authorized to sign and seal the bylaws. Bylaw, being a bylaw to declare a portion of town-owned lands described as Block 1 in Section A attached to and forming part of the bylaw surplus to the needs of the municipality and therefore available for disposition, and to authorize the mayor and clerk to exercise a lease agreement between the corporation of the town of Pelham and Wellspring Niagara Cancer Support Foundation for the lease of said lands. And that was at our last meeting, of course. And the next bylaw is being a bylaw to amend bylaw 3217, 2011, confirming various appointments to boards, commissions, and committees of the town of Pelham, and to appoint Tom McIntyre and Gail Balchis-Chataway to the Christmas in Pelham Committee. Any discussion on any of those items? There being none, I call the question. All those in favor? Any opposed? That motion is carried. I need a mover for recessing the in-camera portion of the meeting. Moved by Councillor Papp, seconded by Councillor King. That council recess the in-camera portion of the meeting and reconvene immediately following the committee meeting scheduled for later this evening. Any discussion? There being none, I call the question. All those in favor? Any opposed? That motion is carried. So this meeting is recessed until our committee meeting. Thank you. Do you want to keep going, council? Okay.
Oh, just gotta find the
Now we're moving to committee.
document.
I see that we have quorum, and I call this regular meeting for the Town of Pelham Committee of the Whole to order. It's been moved by Councillor Ribbiak, seconded by Councillor Durley, that the agenda for the November 3rd, 2014 regular meeting of Committee of the Whole be adopted. Are there any amendments to the agenda? There being none, I call the question. All those in favor? Any opposed? That motion is carried. The next item is disclosure of pecuniary interest. That is any conflicts of interest. Do any members have any conflicts of interest they need to disclose at this time? Can that be so noted, Madam Clerk? Thank you. Now we move to department reports. It's been moved by Councillor King, seconded by Councillor Durley, that the Committee of the Whole receive the issue sheet regarding the banking services agreement to recommend to Council that the CIBC be awarded the town's provider of banking services, and that the mayor and clerk be authorized to enter into an agreement with the CIBC for a term of 5 years from January 1st, 2015 to December 31st, 2019. Discussion. Councillor Papp?
Just through you, 30 seconds through the treasurer. How many actually did submit
Madam Treasurer?
full
There was
proposal?
only 2 that submitted, which is why I pulled from it, but
Okay, good.
But there were many that picked up the package, just not.
So,
that's how many picked up the package. They got that off the Badingo website, so they actually are registered, they have to register the name, so we know how many pulled. but only 2 submitted documents.
Okay, good. Thank you. Others? There being none, I call the question. All those in favor? Any opposed? That motion is carried. Thank you. It's been moved by Councillor Lane, seconded by Councillor Durley, that Committee of the Whole receive the October 2014 Corporate Services Monthly Report for information. Discussion. Councillor Ribbiak, go ahead.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I'm looking at item 7 in the report, Town of Pelham website, and it reads that staff are working on adding a tax calculator on the town's website and looking at doing the work in-house. Programming can absorb an awful lot of time and energy. Just wondering why we would do it in-house as opposed to just buy something off the shelf that might do the job, might save us a lot of time.
Madam Treasurer?
Through you, Mr. Mayor. With the previous website, we were able to do the tax calculator ourselves. It's just a matter of being able to access certain processes within the website, not actually doing the programming. It's a very simple tool to develop, and currently we have to contact the website provider, pay a fee to have them do it, and the time it takes to do it. I mean, I've been waiting probably 2 months for this to even come to fruition at this point, so we're looking at ways of eliminating that red tape and having access to some of those sites where we can put that tax calculator rate on there ourselves.
Okay, so it's more efficient for us to do it in this case than otherwise. That's good. Thank you.
Thank you. Others? Councillor Kersey.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I have two areas that I'd like to discuss, if I could.
Go ahead.
Item number 24 in the report, municipal grant policy. I was just wondering, have we formed the committee? We've seen no names come forward. I just
We extended, through you, Mr. Mayor, we extended the application period because we did not have a great response to it. We now have 2 of the 3 members. So we are looking to go to community members that we know to ask them if they'd be willing to sit on the committee. I think the premise was they thought it was going to be a long, arduous process, and it's really, you know, a couple of meetings before budget time. So we're hoping to bring forward the nominations on the 17th to council.
Okay, thank you.
Okay, thank you. Anyone else on that item? Okay, go ahead, Councillor.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Through you, I would like to have a bit of discussion around the budget process. I have a feeling, or I would like personally, because I'm a detail person, I like detail. My thought was that with respect to the capital budget, and for that matter, the operating budget, it would be very useful for council to have a look at the wish list, if you want to call it that, the submissions of the various directors of the various departments, with their indication of what priority items they would see as most significant in their wish list. And coupled with that, then the recommendations of the treasurer and the CAO to come forward, so that then we could have the background information that we might need, because folks in our community will raise issues with us, and it would be nice to know that consideration were given to some or all of the things that the directors might have wanted to put forward.
Okay.
So it may mean lengthening the process a little bit, but for that matter, I think it would add some information to council and help us to make a more informed decision with respect to both the capital and the operating budget.
Okay, thank you. Madam Treasurer, do you want to start off responding to the,
Mr. Mayor,
can you inform us what the process is, and maybe we can tease out what the councillor is suggesting?
Currently, the directors are working on finalizing the request for capital. And the request for capital, and the process is for 2014. We have a lot of development. We're going to have, the cash flow is going to become an issue with respect to the development of the East Fontaine lands. So they have been given the list to prioritize up front. At the special meeting the special budget meeting, which we have yet to set a date for, we do go through all of the items. And the wish list is summarized in the 5-year plan that they develop for council. So you'll see all of the items throughout the 5 years, and they've identified them as priority items within each year for council. So that comes to you on that special budget meeting where you can see all of the projects that the directors are suggesting that need to be done in the next 5 years. And then you can pull and ask questions about them at that time. And then from that meeting, we go into the capital budget presentation meeting where, given your recommendations or suggestions at that special budget meeting, some changes can be made to that capital budget before it comes forward to council.
So just,
That's
Madam
the
Treasurer,
capital
the
side.
special budget meeting, is that not the public meeting, the
No,
open house?
in the last couple of years, we've done both. We've done the special budget meeting, where I bring in what we know are the actual
Right.
increases that we don't really have control over. And then we also do the budget open house, which is for the public to come to.
Okay. Counselor?
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. So for clarity then, if a given director has 26 items on their budget wish list for 2015, and they would have then earmarked those items that they deem to be priority items for 2015, and that the balance then would be spread over 16, 17, and 18, and that, all that information would be coming to us.
Through you, Mr. Mayor, that is correct. Part of the process is also is what we can afford. I mean, with respect, if there's 26 items and it puts you in a $4 million deficit in the reserve, obviously they can't be done just because of affordability. So it takes into account the balance between what we can afford, what's priority, and what projects can wait for till next year to be completed. There's some urgencies in projects with respect to the development that's coming and other things with buildings that mechanical systems have some issues with and stuff. Those things are coming forward for 2015 for sure.
Counselor Kersey, I think when I reflect on it and looking more at the, let's say, the bigger picture of what you're asking, what's behind that, there's a prioritization process that occurs at the staff level. And I guess the priority that the treasurer just spoke about is funding. And then there's other priorities. So when we think about roads, maybe that's the easiest to determine. The director would say, there's this road, it needs to be repaired, et cetera, and it has a higher prioritized level. But I don't know that we've the CEO and I have had this discussion about in terms of other criteria for, let's say, doing roads. So what are those other criteria? Are they just replacement? Are they development, et cetera? So we heard some of that in some of the answers from the treasurer, but I don't know that council has sort of said on a prioritized way, which I think is behind what you're talking about. You know, these are the priorities. We want to make sure it's affordable, of course, but we also have we want to repair the roads. We want to, what about new growth? Those kind of things. Is that what you're kind of getting at, Councillor?
Well, yeah, I think that is part of it. I think also what enters into it is coming to an agreement on what we feel the levy could be increased by, for example, to meet some of the priorities that we might see. You know, maybe staff has in mind that we would only increase 1.2%, where we might feel it's palatable to be able to increase 2% to allow us to do certain other priority projects. Or we may have heard from constituents about projects that are in a particular ward or area of our community that were deemed to be priorities. So I guess I just want to ensure that there's been a fulsome discussion around the table before we pass up either the capital or the operating budget. That prioritization has been engaged in by both at the staff level, the director level, and the treasurer, and so that we're not just saying our sole and one and only priority is the amount of money we have to spend, because sometimes keeping the budget to the cost of living is actually taking a step backwards. And I'm not advocating for expanding the budget, but I'm just saying those are the sort of considerations that we need to be able to sit around the table and discuss.
You want to go with it with eyes wide open?
Yeah, exactly. I think
And have the
ultimately
discussion.
we're the fall guys when it comes to passing a budget, and we're the ones that hear about the budget and the tax increases and all of that sort of stuff. So again, it's trying to be as transparent and out there and in front of the public as possible.
Okay. thank you. Councillor Papp, you want to
Well,
weigh in on this?
just building on, I guess my ultimate question is that if there's a set of prerequisites that staff, I've been on the other side of the fence, where issues of affordability, public safety, alignment with strategic plan, impact on growth and stuff, and I'm just assuming, which I hope I'm assuming correctly, that those are the characteristics or those are the prerequisites that would be taken consideration as part of a development of a capital budget, and as well as part of the development and the parameters for an operating budget, because those then become, and then ultimately, you're right, Councilor Kersey, it is up to us as the corporation's directors and the head of council that if we feel that some of them are much more, how could I say, have a higher impact, and then we will do what we need to do to get them corrected. I can speak, and I know Councilor Durley, and I can tell you that in our first term, there were major issues of public safety. There were things that we had to get repairs done. We had to get stuff done simply because I think it was needed. It was, in some cases, we're not pointing blame, but it just needed to get done. As time went on and we became much more, how can I say, filterizing how that whole process works. And then and on the public side, is the questions always come to us and say, well, did you consider this? Did you consider that? As long as that's spelled out, I think the general public understands of the decisions we make. You're right, we can't, Madam Treasurer, just wildly, we've seen that, go and say, okay, we're going to set tax increases because we know we can afford it. That's not the point. That's one point. The point is, does it align with all these other characteristics? So if I'm assuming those things are there, then that satisfies me also from both an operating standpoint and a capital standpoint. So thank you, Mr. Mayor, for allowing me to speak to that.
Thank you very much. Councillor Durley, you want to comment?
Yes, thank you, Mr. Mayor. I think we should be careful not to go back to the line-by-line situation that we
God,
had
no.
a few terms ago, because that just, you spin your tires, and this seems to be going in that direction. I have full confidence that staff is fully aware of where we want to go and how we can get there. So, in general, I think a discussion that is being suggested here is a good idea. However, for us to go in and say line by line, I really think we're going down a slippery slope at that particular point, because we have developed our budgeting procedure to something that is fluid and keeps the tax level this instead of having peaks and valleys. I like this idea. I think the public likes this idea, and I think we should continue on that. However, yes, we have to keep in mind that there are certain things that need to be done, and certain things that we want to get done, and certain things we wish we could get done. So, keeping that in mind, I think staff is of level head to make sure that these priorities are there. And if the report is coming forward to say the discussion did take place, and this is the general discussion around it, and we are allowed to ask some questions about it and get some answers of it that could satisfy any of the public's questions that we may receive. So I have full confidence that the way in which we budget now is much better than the line by line that we used to do, and I would like to keep on in that direction.
Okay, thank you very much, Councillor Durley. I appreciate that. I think just to build on the comments that we've heard, I think what Councillor Kersey was looking for was sort of maybe the next number of, and it's probably easier with a capital budget, but the next number of projects that aren't in the mix that maybe a director recommended, but for whatever reason, for affordability or for other reasons, timing or whatever, that the treasurer and the CAO aren't recommending to us. So, Madam Treasurer, can that be talked about, or when can that be done as part of the budget process?
Through you, Mr. Mayor, that can be done at the special meeting of budget, or the special budget meeting with council, where I bring in the increases. Council gives me direction on that at that night as well, on what they expect in the tax rate levy. And that, significantly impacts on what you can do capital-wise, because it's only the sustainability piece that goes to the capital budget. So, I mean, with the premise of using and borrowing from reserves in the past, with respect to some of them being in deficits because of grant applications and stuff, 2015 is a tight year in-house here, with making sure that we are showing that we are responsible to get those reserves back to a solid number. So there have been a lot of requests that have come through already that are for, nice wants that would be good around the town. However, you know, we've kind of pushed them back to directors to say, take a harder look at this and make sure what we're bringing forward for 2015 specifically because of all of the development that we're doing are those true needs for 2015. Those are the public safety issues, the things that absolutely can't wait for 2015. But at the special budget meeting, I can bring forward all of those requests and then you can review them at that time.
I'd be
Okay?
very happy with that.
Okay,
I'm
thank you.
Yeah.
Just to build on that, and there's two items. The first is, and I'm going to ask the CAO to comment on this, Councillor Papp identified some criteria, and so I'm thinking to some scoring, you know, whether it's a 1, 2, or 3, or whatever it is on the scoring in terms of affordability, public safety, alignment with strategic plan are the ones that you identified, which was building on what I said. Mr. CAO, you know, can we give you, I guess, are those the types of things that you can score some of the capital projects on? Can you just fill us in on that, please?
Yes, it is, Mr. Mayor. If the council is looking for some sort of ranking system to demonstrate the decision-making process, then we'd be more than pleased to do that.
Okay, councillors? So maybe that can come back to us in a couple of meetings about what's the ranking, and we can approve that, and then that ranking criteria can be used. Okay. I know at the region they use growth as well as a possibility. New growth, sustainability, maintenance, those kind of criteria. So it's important to have that in the mix. Public request might be another one. The final thing is in terms of this special council meeting, Madam Treasurer, you said it wasn't in the schedule, and I just sent out a very lengthy schedule earlier today about all the meetings, including the budget. What are you recommending in terms of this special meeting, and would it occur on the same night as the public meeting or after? No. It would be subsequently after that,
I
correct?
think that at the last public open house, we did it right after that meeting, so that was going to be my suggestion. I just noted today that we had not identified that as a separate meeting, so we'll talk with the clerk tomorrow and
Yeah,
arrange
well,
that.
let's try and set that meeting, and maybe we can align it with another meeting that we have. We have a lot of meetings coming up, so.
I'm gonna be sick.
Okay?
I'm going back to the.
Anything further on that piece? So that direction is given to staff to come back with those criteria for consideration?
Then we can go through
Councillor
that.
Kersey, anything further on that?
I'm happy.
Okay,
That's very good.
Thank you. Any others on the treasurer's report? This is going to be a bit of a theme, I think, and we'll start with the treasurer. Oh, I'm sorry, Councillor Lane, go ahead, sir.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I'm not sure this is for the treasurer or it's not for the treasurer, but it was something that I heard when I was out and about doing some campaigning, and that was to do with the inability of individuals to make contact at town hall through the phone system. And people were venting their frustration as not being able to get through to somebody and things along that line. And I just wondered if I can just throw it out there for food for thought for someone that they may look at that and find out if there's something that can be done to make it easier for the citizens when they call in. If they get voicemail and or whatever they get frustrated and they don't know an extension number and they don't know the person's name who they want to get a hold of. It's very frustrating for them. So it might be something that can be looked at to see if that can be streamlined or something in the future.
I'm going to turn to the CAO. Mr. CAO?
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. It's something that we haven't heard a lot of complaints about internally. Like, I've not received complaints with regards to that issue, not to say that it isn't an issue. So I'd be more than happy to review it with the directors and take a second look at the system to make sure that it's customer friendly and easy to use.
Okay, thank you. I think councillors were nodding because we each heard it out there. Councillor Papp, to that, do you want to just speak briefly to that?
I think that's a great idea, Mr. CAO, that it's a good point. We installed a new phone system. It's not being disrespectful, and we say, but we did hear it. People, human contact, talk on the phone. So maybe you can take an internal assessment of that, get back to us, let us know if there's things that need to be improved, how we can make it easier, and then we can communicate that to the general public and say, we'll be responsive, you will, because we did. I would be remiss if I didn't tell you that I
Lots of
did hear
nodding.
that.
Okay.
Right?
Thank you, Counselor.
Thanks.
Anything further on that? So we'll take that as, add that as direction. Thank you,
Staff
Counselor
direction.
Lane, for raising that. Others? I was going to start saying that this will be a theme in some of the reports, and that is when we receive information about the number of this or the number of that, especially on one of the first pages of the report. I think it's important on some of these. Here, total requests from staff regarding the public service request 12, total requests from staff non-PSR 12, information technology. I think what's important is to know that, and this is in the bylaw report, and it's in other reports, the building, but it's not in others, that we receive these requests, but how many were actually dealt with? How many are remaining? Right? Are we getting through these things, and are we meeting them in the timelines in which we have for them? So there's maybe it's to build on what was talked about earlier about customer service, but are we meeting the customer service criteria that we have for these types of things? So I know this is, information technology. Well, half of that is you have to deal with immediately, sort of thing, but some of it's more long-term. So in terms of getting some of that information on future reports, Madam Treasurer, I would just ask you to take a look at the report on behalf of Council. Take a look at the report and see if there's a number of items that can be, like the bylaw report, this many new ones, this many remaining, this many dealt with, that kind of thing, so that we can not only see a snapshot, but also a bit of a broader picture. Are we meeting those demands? If that's okay with colleagues, that we ask staff to take a look at that in this case. Councillor Pat?
Yes, I think you hit on a very critical point. The whole aspect of the public service request electronic implementation needs across the board, I want to say, a diagnostic review, just to see how well it's working, where we can improve it, because myself and I don't know about the others, we heard the same thing, and it's not a criticism, it's just some people didn't know how to use it, they didn't get a response. Maybe it's worthwhile for you to come back and say, here's what the kinds of things that we've been doing, these are the things that were delayed. And it's a fact. I got today, in fact, normally I don't get, one of my constituents sent me requests that he's made to a certain department. He's wondering why he didn't get called. What we want to do is we want to make sure that we, and I'll just say for myself, don't start cross-interfering with and taking on the role which we understand and say, well, we'll take care of it for you, meaning us as councillors. That puts us in a very precarious position, because if you promise something and it doesn't happen, then it's, so we have a very good system. I like, but let's just find out how good and fix it where it needs to be fixed. Thanks, Mr. Mayor.
Thank
That's
you
very
very much.
good.
Thank you. So, Mr. CEO, if that can be looked at across departments, and we might raise it under Public Works as another example, so thank you. Madam Treasurer, there's a change to the debenture sheet that you added. Can you identify that, please?
Yes, there was a revised debenture schedule put on the
Some
council's
clarity.
desk. The in-year debenture was issued for 2014, so it was put into a separate column as a debt issue instead of the column with the opening balance, just for clarity, to make sure that the opening balance is really what ended at 2013 and what our debt was, and then the new debt was taken on. So we'll provide this schedule with every time there's a new debenture, and also part of the capital and operating budgets.
Okay.
Okay.
Thank you. And then the final was about the e-billing, 659. Sounds good. What's the goal? Remind us.
Well, the goal would be 100%, obviously. But
3,000 or something, right?
yeah, 4,400. So, but having said that, we have more than tripled our take from the get-go of having e-billing available. So the program has been very successful to this point. We see an influx of e-billing registrations when we send out the water bill, and the corresponding promotional item for e-billing goes out. So we're going to continue that on. Once this project is, or this competition is, or contest is completed, we'll bring a report with all the stats back to council and decide what we're going to do next to get more on board.
Okay. Thank you very much. Anything further on the treasurer's report? Some good discussion. Oh, I'm sorry, Councilor Pat, go ahead.
No, I just want to extend through you, Mr. Mayor, to the treasurer. Thank you for explaining, because one of the questions I had, which was a little complicated even, was the issue of consolidated debt in the town. And I think people were asking questions like, are you going deeper in the hole? I'm making it simple, but it was good. It was an excellent explanation, because I think people were getting confused that somehow they thought we were increasing debt when in fact we were managing the debt for a variety of projects. So over the course, as we start, you're right, into the next 12 to 18 months, when there's going to be all kinds of activity going on, there's going to be questions about, our financial capability of handling that, and the issues of debt are going to have to be, sometimes I would suggest, Mr. CEO, as part of communications, to letting people know where we're doing, why we're doing it, and maybe that's part of a strategy we can discuss with our new term. Thank you, Mr. Mayor.
Thank you very much, Councilor Pop. Appreciate that. And agree. Going to call the question. All those in favor? Any opposed? And those include the directions as well. That motion is carried. Thank you. It's been moved by Councilor Durley, second by Councilor Lane, that Committee of the Whole receive the issue sheet regarding the Peace Park Master Plan budget reallocation for electrical and architectural design, and the Committee of the Whole recommend to Council that a portion, $66,500, of the remaining budget, $200,000, for the implementation of the Peace Park Master Plan be reallocated to allow for the commencement of the Peace Park electrical design and the municipal building accommodation study and public washroom design. Discussion. Councillor Ribbiak.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Just with respect to a detail around drawings and planning for a washroom in Peace Park, I think there's an indication here that it would cost about $50,000 to plan for just the washroom. Those of us who attended the convention in Niagara Falls earlier this year saw examples of self-contained washrooms that probably fill the bill at a price. But I'm wondering if that price would have included the design and planning that would otherwise be paid for in this study, and whether the inclusion of those units might have been part of this of this report, and indeed whether thinking about those units might include a savings to us in terms of the design aspect of it.
Mr. CEO, who's answering that?
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I'm not sure I fully understand the question. However, the reason for the review is for a number of reasons. One, there is some debate about which side to put the washroom on, for example, because the services are on Pelham Town Square, whereas the most benefit to this building would be on this side. For example, there's no water running to this end of the building, so public washroom would help facilitate that. There's other questions around access during meetings like tonight with no washroom availability, so members of the public are accessing office space, so there's a number of considerations there. Whether or not a standalone system would work or be more cost effective, we haven't even gone there yet. We simply need to know things like the most efficient place to put it, what's the greatest benefit for the building, and also looking at the future. What's going to be the greatest bang for the buck as far as future growth or expansion of Town Hall, if and when that would occur.
Okay, thank you. Councillor, you're interested in getting more information or having staff research before this comes to council?
Yes.
That particular washroom configuration, is that correct?
That's right. This is the master plan for Peace Park. Washroom facilities within Peace Park are obviously an important element in it. I think the CAO was talking about a need that people using this building have. I'm not sure that I understood that to be part of the Peace Park master plan, but it might well be. Certainly, the provision of water and wastewater, wherever you put it, is an important part of it. But I'm just wondering whether as we design this, or as the town looks at this, it isn't also looking at those units. My guess is that they come with a package of planning already as part of the installation instructions almost, that might result in some savings in this, but it also give us some direction, a direction for the planning to go, that the inclusion of a unit like that might in fact be very useful for Peace Park. Now, whether there were other objectives that don't readily appear here, that's another matter. I don't know about those.
So those are standalone
Yes.
units? Okay, Mr. CO?
Just for clarity, the washrooms would indeed be for public washroom space, so they'd be accessible from the exterior of the building for events, concerts, band shell, that sort of thing. So it would be a shared facility as opposed to simply an external standalone facility. There's a number of logistical issues with a standalone facility, notwithstanding just basic maintenance, but also getting the most use out of a facility for the cost. Not to say that we wouldn't look at a standalone, but there's also requirements, I guess, with the number of occupants allowed, or the estimated occupancy of a park during an event would dictate how many stalls you would need, male and female, that sort of thing. We just have to do a little bit more research on that. But the first point is going to be the basic architectural issues about, where to put it, the servicing, long-term use of the building, that sort of thing. So,
Anything further at this point? Okay, thank you. Others? Councillor Kirsty.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I have a couple of concerns here. I was in the meeting, Mr. Mayor, that you chaired actually of the user groups, and there were 5 items that were identified as being priority items by that group with respect to Peace Park. And those five items, 2 of which are addressed here, were the priority items, washrooms. And the feeling was not to have portable washrooms in a beautiful park, but to have a fixed facility, whether it's at the south or the north end. And the CAO rightly pointed out that bringing it at the north end would add some advantages to the use of this room and for the type of meeting we're having tonight or many other meetings that we wouldn't necessarily then have to worry about accessing the rest of the staff areas of the building. And in addition to that, there was concern about having readily available electrical services sufficiently sized, as well as potable water for such things as supper market. So I'm presuming that when we're doing the servicing planning, that we're going to take that into consideration as well. In addition to that, there were 3 other items that I don't see mentioned in this report, and I just wanted to hear from the CAO how we're going to deal with that. There was a discussion about, that was in the original plan that came forward with respect to Peace Park, and that was having a plaza area at the north end of this building, where the supper market stood this year. Basically, it was on the roadway, but that was going to be converted into a plaza area that could be used and would like to be used by the supper market. And it was felt by the user groups at that time that that was a good place to locate it. So I don't know that we can pull pieces out of what we've already done to accommodate that and get the pricing on that, or whether we should include that in our planning here. Fourthly, there was a discussion, and it was all felt by all, that to move the cenotaph was in fact, a very good thing to undertake, to move it down to the street, and then to perform grading on the upper part so that the park would be flatter and more usable for such things as Summerfest and the kids' bouncy area and all of that sort of thing. And the fifth thing was there was a clear direction from the band shell that they had serious concerns about the tiered seating and felt that accommodation could be made by taking the grade and making a natural amphitheater there that would make it easier for them to use and for the seniors to access and provide less risk of people falling off the tiered seating, etc. So I don't see a number of those things in this report, and I just wondered how they were going to be addressed, whether we were going to pull pieces here and there, or because I think if we're going to do this, let's get a comprehensive review of it and bring a final report once and for all and say this is the direction we're going and this is how much it's going to cost. So, Mr. Mayor, perhaps I should direct that to the CAO or to Mr. Mantle.
Very good synopsis of that meeting, Councillor, so thank you very much. Mr. CAO, can you respond?
Yes, the points that the councillor points out or raises, Mr. Mayor, are absolutely accurate. At that meeting, there was an overall plan, as you recall, that we did go to tender with that plan, and council deferred it into next year's budget. The committee basically did a phase 1, phase 2 approach, and phase 1 were many of the items that the councillors raised. The work The work with the items that he raised, notwithstanding what's before you, has already been completed. So the design is done. We have tender-ready documents. We even have the pricing from last year, although it still wouldn't be, it would have to be re-tendered, but we have an idea, a ballpark idea. What we don't have is we need the electrical design done so that we could tender that work. The problem that we ran into with the project is that it's probably 90% landscape architecture. The other 10% requires trades that the landscape firms don't have. So the landscape firms were reluctant to bid on a project where they would have to hire an electrical engineering firm to do a bid for them, of which they may not get awarded, and therefore that expense is out of pocket. So we agreed that in order for us to proceed, that we would have to have the electrical design done, and for the other reasons that were raised. In relation to the washroom was excluded from the park design because, again, it was an architectural feature that was separate from the landscape architecture design for the park. So that item was left out. So we're just looking to bring that in so that we would have a plan for that. And that if council was to go with phase one, we would have all the required documentation in place to go to tender.
Well, I'm going to just ask for the council, the tiering, non-tiering? We have pricing for tiering.
Non-tiering would be less expensive. But we don't, but we'd have to go back out to tender to figure that out. We'd have to do some redesign as well on that.
I think that's what the councilor's saying, so.
Yeah, no, sorry, Mr. Mayor, the redesign work on that will be conducted.
Is part of this money.
Yeah, it would be part of that fund. That's where the original plan came out of this budget. We're asking to expand the scope from the design to include these two other elements so that we would have a comprehensive package.
Councilor?
Okay, I mean, that's fine, as long as we get the answer to all of those things. I think phase one is to address the 5 priority items that were put forward by that working group, representative of all the groups that seem to use the park to any degree. And if that's the case, that's fine. I might suggest that instead of hiring an engineer for the electrical, you might go to tender on a design build, because there are lots of electrical firms that have their own people that can do designs. It's a relatively simple thing, I think, and unless you're going to look at the entire electrical situation in this building, which is in need of addressing. So perhaps that might be something that could be looked at the same time, is addressing the electrical needs of this building as well as the electrical needs of to feed the park. Just a thought.
Mr. CEO, does the 16,000 include the electrical needs for this facility, or is it simply for Peace Park?
It's Peace Park, including the building, Mr. Mayor. The design build would be a great scenario if we had the ability to proceed with the build part, but we don't. It's capital. It's not budgeted, so therefore we couldn't proceed with the build part of that. Although, you know, I'd love to do it all in one shot. It's just not. It's not in the cards right now.
Okay. Councilor, anything further?
Okay, no, I've made my point, I think.
Okay, thank you. Others? Mr. CEO, can you just expand a little bit on what's here in the report? Councilor Ribiak started talking about the washroom. Councilor Kersey talked about the washroom as well. But the money that's here for what's called accommodation study is really much broader than simply Peace Park. It talks about the needs and functionality of this building in general, does it not?
That's correct, Mr. Mayor.
I guess when we as a council put money aside for Peace Park, we thought that we would actually be doing some work in Peace Park and not necessarily work on this particular building. So that work may need to occur. And we are doing analysis on all of our buildings. Why is staff recommending that we take that money out of a parks fund as opposed to other facilities funds?
We're recommending that, Mr. Mayor, because it would be essential to ensure that any addition to the building is contemplated as a whole of the building as opposed to just a piece of the building. So we want to make sure that we are considering things like future growth or expansion, that we're building a facility that can be added to and expanded on. If we simply said that we want an architectural drawing to put a bathroom out here that was this size, that's one thing, but come 5 or 10 years from now, when you look at expanding, that may not be a compatible build or location, or the servicing may be incorrect. I understand much the same way as the approach council took with this particular facility, that there is the ability to go up because it was designed that way in the beginning, and that's the holistic approach that we wanted to take to the architectural study.
Okay. Well, I think I understand that, and to take the holistic approach makes sense. But also, I think that in terms of this particular fund, which is, everybody was thinking it was for Peace Park. I think when we approved it back in 2013, it was for Peace Park and get works done in Peace Park, and we're all excited about that. And now it's, this recommendation is changing it from that fund. So I don't know if the treasurer has another reserve and facilities reserve that we can draw on for at least part of the component of this, or whether we can look at the other way to sort of go over the logjam is to say, as we move ahead, we can put money into this from another reserve in the budget. Madam Treasurer?
The scope of this project, from my understanding, got elevated from just Peace Park to include other elements, like the gateways leading out to the arches and the Churchill Street. So based on that premise, we were looking at the downtown core in total with respect to how the Peace Park was going to be designed and developed here. One of the things that came out of the meeting when we had the design or the tender results come in was if we do work around this building and then there's additional work that needs to be done on this building, would we be lifting the work that's been done up and then replacing it? So we wanted to make sure that with this this architectural review that would never be the case, that what we were doing complemented whatever needed to be done on this building as well, so that we were only doing it once. So the thought was that the funding right now would come from this budget when we move forward with the Peace Park design and build, that we would allocate funds through the reserve for that purpose. So it's coming from the same fund, it's just a matter of what you call it at this point.
Okay, thank you. I appreciate that, and recollection that we did expand the scope to include more of the downtown as well and the interactions for that, so.
Not the downtown master.
Thank you. It is somewhat linked to the downtown master plan.
That's what I'm saying.
So, okay. And the timing of this will be available for consideration at capital budget time, Mr. CAO?
Absolutely, Mr. Mayor.
Okay. Thank you. Any others?
Sorry, Mr. Mayor, may I just clarify the tender for the Peace Park construction at capital budget time, or this particular project at budget time?
No, that we'll know the results of this so that we can move
correct.
forward on the five items that Councillor Kirsty.
That's correct.
So that we can consider them in our capital budget.
Yes.
Okay. Thank you. Anyone else? Councillor Papp? Councillor
Well,
Kirsty?
building on this, notwithstanding the work that has gone into the downtown master plan, the Peace Park, is I'm also hearing it's the functionality of this building both on a short term and a long term. That's what I'm hearing as well. That depending on that may need to be done as a functional analysis or assessment, if you want to call it, to determine how much we need in way of resources and space to accommodate, to continue to provide services, notwithstanding that we're going to be enhancing the Peace Park component as well and components of downtown. So that's a discussion we should have perhaps at a capital budget time too, because I can see that those of who were here when we had this addition, if we had hindsight, probably would have made some other changes, but now maybe is the time to put together that sort of long-term planning for how this all fits in. You know what I mean? Like the pieces of the puzzle all fit in. The downtown looks, the Civic Square looks like, what Peace Park looks like, what all of that looks like all the way down. So I'll leave that for another time and date, so make sure that and all the other components that go with that, power changes, physical changes, et cetera, so that I see a larger thing emerging. That's for the positive. So we're prepared and not reacting, when we run out of room and all that, and all of a sudden we've got to put up. And if it doesn't preclude, for that matter, that if there are some components and some tools that we saw that could be incorporated as part of that Peace Park, we would consider those. Okay, good. Thank you very much,
Councillor
Mr. Mayor.
Kirsty, and then I am going to turn back to Councillor Ribbiak just to make sure that that's represented in this. So Councillor
Mr.
Kirsty
Mayor,
and then
just,
Councillor
very
Ribbiak.
briefly, I just want to get clarity on the electrical design as part of the designing process, will they be looking at the electrical needs of this building
Yes.
as well? Because that may be the central feeding point.
That's right.
And they'll be making
Power source.
recommendations, and part of the tendering process will be to redesign the electrical of this building as well?
Is that part of the power sources that's there?
That's correct, Mr. Mayor.
Okay, thank you.
Okay, thank you. Councilor Ribbiak, can we, you have any suggestions on how to capture at least getting the pricing or take a look at that as an option for the washroom?
I think that this discussion went obviously beyond this particular report, and it clarified for me that in fact we're not just talking about Peace Park, we're talking about a much bigger project, and that it becomes a question in my mind whether it's appropriate to think about standalone or connected bathrooms at this point at all, because we just haven't got that preparatory work. So I'm going to pull back on that comment and kind of wait and see what comes further in the future.
Okay, thank you. Anything further? There being none, are we ready for calling of the question? All those in favor?
Good discussion.
Any opposed? That motion is carried. It was a good discussion. Thank you. Been moved by Councilor Papp, seconded by Councilor Kersey. The Committee of the Whole received the October 2014 Public Works and Utilities Department report for information. Questions, comments? Councilor Kersey? Councilor
On
Beverly?
Public Works we're dealing with.
Yes.
Right. Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Kind of had a bit of, well, I won't say what I had.
You got a moment.
I had one of those senior moments. I'm having more of those lately. Anyway, through you to Mr. Mantle, if I may, Mr. Mayor, I was raised the issue last meeting regarding the Effingham shoulders. And to date, nothing has been done there. I fear we're going to lose more of those paved shoulders if they're not addressed very soon. Could you bring us up to date on that, Mr. Mantle?
Through you, Mr. Mayor, the asphalt crew's in town right now. They're working, doing patches throughout the town, and they will not be missed.
As a follow-up, so it's not so much that we need to patch up the paved shoulders, but we need to shore them up with some kind of stone or dirt or something, because they're getting undermined with the water flows across Effingham Street there, and it's washing it out. You know, the result of the big storm, nothing, and it hasn't been addressed to this date. I just wondered, is that part of the patching of the concrete or of the paving, or is that a separate issue?
That's a separate issue that's being dealt with by the ditching tender, and that crew's also working in town right now. So they'll all be working together to pull that together.
Do we have a timeline on that, Mr.
Well, both crews are in town right now.
I see.
So again, I would guess in November.
Okay.
I have another issue.
Anyone
but-
else on those items? No? Go ahead, Councilor.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I would like to raise the issue of the Pelham Street crosswalks. Many of us, as we were walking the streets, knocking on doors, heard about it ad nauseum. And we had raised some issues the last meeting regarding costs of converting to four-way stops, particularly at Pancake Lane. In Churchill, there's some threat there to the pedestrians, the way it's currently set up. And I wondered if we have any information coming back to us with respect to that. I see it as a public safety issue here, the way they were designed and implemented. And I'd like to hear from Mr. Mantle on that, if I could.
Mr. Mantle?
Through you, Mr. Mayor, excuse me, we can certainly inquire about the cost of converting to signalized intersections. If you recall, that was the request of council to go with the pedestrian crosswalks as part of a problem-solving issue. It was identified at the Pancake Lane intersection. I believe council approved a fully signalized intersection, and there was some disagreement amongst the public, I think, and we reviewed that and came up with 4 pedestrian crosswalks approved for Pelham Street. So we can certainly go back to the region and inquire as to the cost of converting at least one location per year possibly as fully signalized intersections, starting with the Pancake Lane one, and maybe working on with the Churchill after that.
Thank you, Councillor.
Through you, Mr. Mayor. Thank you, Mr. Mantle. I quite agree. It was a council decision based on feedback from the working group that was formed. And it was a learning experience for all of us. I think crosswalks, in retrospect, work well in mid-blocks. They don't work particularly well on corners unless they're a four-way type of stop. Because what we're seeing both at Churchill and at Pancake is that the cars that are waiting at Churchill to make a right or particularly a left-hand turn when the traffic flow stops going north-south on Pelham Street, they think it's their time to go, and that's just when the pedestrians are halfway across the intersection. So yeah, I think it should be viewed as a learning experience, and hopefully it won't be too expensive of a learning experience, but I would appreciate that information coming back so we can deal with this safety issue, I think. Mr. Mayor, thank you.
Okay, thank you. Others to this, I had Councillor King, Councillor Durley, Councillor Ribbiak.
On another matter.
Oh, I'm sorry. Councillor King.
Councillor report.
Through you, Mr. Mayor, to Mr. Mantle. I echo what Councillor Kersey is saying. This came to the table at the Active Transportation Committee's last meeting. There is serious concern out there about the safety of pedestrians, as Councillor Kersey said. Vehicles turning left at Churchill because they do not see the lights. The lights are not positioned for traffic other than that is traveling north and south on Pelham Street. So if from either Pancake or Churchill you're making a left-hand turn, you're turning into the pedestrians because you do not see those lights. So it's a huge issue and a huge concern. Thank you, Mr. Mayor.
Councillor Durley.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. The safety of pedestrians notwithstanding, we did receive some input about vehicle traffic having difficulty accessing Pelham Street from Pancake and from Spruce Side. Definitely, there is a concern that cars cannot pass because, you know, we're certainly maybe didn't get the right answer for the pedestrian. Another suggestion that I did hear out there, and I did mention something before about putting lines up at the intersections, and I was informed that at Pancake the road is perhaps too narrow to put a right-hand turning lane from Pancake onto Pelham and have a left from Pancake onto Pelham and have a right from Pelham onto Pancake. That's not wide enough. However, looking at the whole configuration, Spruce Side appears to be much wider, and people living in the Spruce Side area had that same concern, where a car will be waiting to make a left turn onto Pelham Street from Spruce Side and be right in the middle of that lane. If he could be in a left turning lane, that would leave anybody who wants to turn right beside that to go out and perhaps be able to make that right turn onto Pelham Street. And I just wonder if that can be done. That may decrease some of the vehicular congestion that is there, and maybe just a little bit easy to contribute that to the just total situation that we're talking about as far as safety is concerned. And I just wonder if staff can just have a look at that.
Thank you, Mr. Mantle.
We can certainly look at that, yes.
Thank you. I think unless there's others, the recommendation coming out of council was looking at some remedies and a report. A number of suggestions things have been suggested. How are you going to determine which is the best remedy, Mr. Mantle? And making recommendations to council for this. So we've had a bunch of ideas here on this.
My guess is that in all likelihood, a traffic study should be done at those intersections to, you know, if you want to examine them in totality and identify what needs to be done. I think trying to design it as a group is probably not the right path to follow. We should get someone who specializes in that sort of thing. They can examine each intersection, look at the traffic counts, the turning motions, and come up with a solution that says, yes, you need a fully signalized intersection. We'll probably find that the intersections don't warrant full signals, and because there's a certain traffic volume that's required. And most likely, Pelham Street does meet that criteria. However, it's the side streets that won't meet it. But I don't think that's hindered us in the past. So we could certainly evaluate it in that manner, include an item in the 2015 budget to, for some sort of a traffic study to examine the intersections and come up with the best solution.
Okay. Thank you. Councillor Kersey?
Mr. Mayor, not to challenge Mr. Mantle's expertise on this, but I think we've identified that we have an issue. Do we need to study it again? Regardless of whether it meets the warrants or not, we have a safety issue. We've all said the same thing. We hear it from our constituents. So we either take the thing out or we make it a four-way to protect it. So, I mean, I don't know that going through a traffic study and looking at warrants and that, we already know that it doesn't or not likely to meet it. So maybe staff should use their expertise, or, you know, and we do trust our staff to make a recommendation to this council as to what the best possible solution would be. The region has some expertise in this field. They designed the darn thing. Why don't we get them engaged here and have them look at it and express to them our concerns and see what they come up with?
Thank you, Councillor. And I agree with you that I don't know that we need to do another study and then put it off. Maybe the CAO could chime in on this, but it seems to me like we now need to look at it again. I've heard things like the gray box at Churchill and Pelham obstructs the intersection. Maybe that should be on the other side. Like, somebody really needs to look at this. Maybe there needs to be an angle of the light angle could be changed so it could remedy what Councillor King was suggesting, that you could only see it going from, you know, north and south. So there may be other options. A full option would be, put in a full intersection, but there might be other interim solutions or other solutions that might be there, and trying to get to those solutions is what I was interested in. Mr. CAO, do you want to comment on that process? I have a process in mind.
No, Mr. Mayor, I tend to agree. I have talked to the director as well about looking at alternatives for realignment of the light, or are the hoods on the light too big, or, you know, is there other obstructions, or is there some alternative signage that can be used? So those sorts of things I have asked him to consider.
Okay, thank you. Councillor King?
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. In terms of a traffic study, I think that the last time this report came to this table, we talked about a traffic study being conducted again, and our concern at that time was the same as it is now, that we probably will not meet the criteria that is necessary to justify putting full traffic signals in there. The fact remains that over and over and over again, we're hearing the same thing. There are businesses on Pelham Street between Churchill and Pelham Town Square that can cite the number of pedestrians that are almost hit with traffic trying to turn left there. So there's a very significant safety concern here. My other concern about traffic studies right now is that both Pancake and Churchill are being faced with increased volumes of traffic because of the amount of construction on Highway 20 and people trying to take other routes to get downtown, out of town, whatever the case is. So the traffic studies, if they were to be conducted right now while this construction's going on, they're skewed as well. So I certainly don't have the answer to the problem. My concern is echoed by many, including the Active Transportation Committee, that there is a very serious safety issue. Thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Papp?
So let's move it forward. We've created these signalizations. The current setup is problematic and features public safety. And I don't, notwithstanding that, if council instructs and directs staff to put in, it's our jurisdiction to do that. And that's, I think that has to be understood. But in the meantime, if there are other design engineering components that, as the CEO has asked Mr. Manon and the director to look at, come back and let us know. and let us know how well it's working, what can and cannot be done. If these things are not remedies that will work and continue to just maybe foster that kind of, I could say, unsafe situation, then the next step is for us to come back as part of our capital considerations and say, guess what, we're going to signalize it, full stop. So that's the way I'm perceiving it, and I think that's important. And I don't want to belabor, because I agree with all of you. I've heard the same things about it. I've been watching, seeing how things are going, and it's, some people are a little confused, particularly at Churchill area. Pancake, again, there's still, and some of it's driver error too. Some of it's driver, they just do not follow through, and let's not wait until something happens drastically, but in the meantime, I trust staff that will come back with those options and let us know how well it's working. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. And so I think moving forward, that is the direction to go in. You and I had a conversation today
Yep.
about the intersection
Yep.
at Regional Road 20 in Effingham.
Right.
There was a safety issue there with
Right.
people turning left from, and they're going down Effingham, turning left onto Regional Road 20. That was dealt with, the region studied it, et cetera. So there are tools in the toolbox
Yes.
to look at these, and there's options that can be there. But I do agree that, you know, there is always the option that council can say in terms of signalizing these intersections fully. And the poles are in the correct spot in order to do that. But that's what I'm interested in saying, and I think that's what council said when it said we need to staff to look at the remedy and develop a report. And I had expected, that was on our October 6th meeting. It's not here tonight. That's what we're looking for. So, Mr. CAO, in terms of the timing of this?
We'll have something back to you, November 17th meeting.
Okay, good.
Okay?
Good.
Council, we're okay with this?
17? Fine. Okay.
Okay. Thank you. Others to the, Councilor Durley, I think you're next on the Public Works.
Okay, that issue is done.
Yes.
Okay. Always, Mr. Mayor, always willing to and happy to celebrate successes. It's very encouraging to note that on September 26th and 29th, the Ministry of Environment came into town unannounced and had a check of our water system, and the town received a score of 100% on the inspection. Kudos to staff for keeping it up, and the residents can be assured that we have safe, potable drinking water, and that's been the case for a number of years. Keep up the good work. A couple of other things, if I may, Mr. Mayor.
Thank you, Councilor.
Later on in the report, we're looking at pavement marking program, which has been completed. Through you to Mr. Mantle, does that include the triangles that are put on the speed humps on Hayes Street?
Mr. Mantle.
Through you, Mr. Mayor, I think they're there already.
Well, they're there and they're gone, because that's not the answer. They were there, and if you look at it, they're pretty well worn off. So that is not the answer. And I heard from more than one person on Hay Street that there is a concern that they should be marked better, because sometimes people have their mind elsewhere and they're driving right, but they are forgetting that those things are there, and it's sort of jarring their fillings out of their teeth. So what they want to do is have some spots where they can see this a little better. The white paint on that hump, just, it does the job for 2 days, and it doesn't do the job after that. It wears out. So I just wonder if there's an alternative that can be more effective in that position.
Mr. Mantle.
We can look at on the asphalt in advance of the speed humps, but the arrowheads are not a prescribed pavement marking for those speed humps. They're marked correctly to begin with. So we'll talk to our service provider for the pavement markings and see if there's something that we can add to it.
Okay, thank you. Councilor Lane, to that point?
I just have to laugh through you, Mr. Mayor, when I hear people on Hayes Street don't know that there's speed bumps that have been there for some time. I think they should concentrate on their driving. Aside from that, the other point is there's also signage there. There's signage warning you that there's a speed bump ahead, and there's also the sign where the speed bump is. So I think if people who live in the neighborhood are having problems, then the problems are not town-related, I would say. That's my comments.
Okay, thank you, Councilor Lane.
Mr. Mayor.
Go ahead, Councilor
Just
Gurley.
perhaps a point of clarity, maybe I wasn't clear. People from Hay Street brought this to my attention, that street is traveled by many folks who don't live in town because now the arena is being used for junior hockey and so on and so forth. So there certainly is a concern that, yes, it is traffic calming, but it also can be damaging to some vehicles as well. But I think an awareness situation where people not only see the signs but also can see the marking on the road will make them more alert to the fact that something is there.
Okay, thank you, Councilor. Do you have another item?
Yes, the fleet technician position, which has been vacant, and it indicates here that we're looking to fill that position. When that position was created, it was brought to our attention that to have a mechanic on staff, it would cut expenses. I just wonder if we can get some kind of a report to say, in the past, when it was outsourced, it cost us X number of dollars, and when we had the position filled within, it cost through wages and through benefits, it cost so much money. And the comparison in there, is it more expensive or less expensive to have somebody on staff doing that, or to have it outsourced, or more efficient? And I just wonder if an indication can be brought forward as we move forward.
Turning to the Treasurer. Madam Treasurer, is that something possible for Council? Can you put those numbers together?
Absolutely, through you, Mr. Mayor.
Okay.
We can do an analysis of the cost to run the mechanic shop compared to outsourcing.
Okay, thank you. Are we comfortable with that? So can we add that, Mr. CEO, you want to comment on that?
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Just to add that it's not solely a cost issue, it's also a customer service issue. So although part of you talk about evaluation criteria, Mr. Mayor, part of that would have to include waiting 3 days for an outsourced mechanic to fix a snowplow, or having our technician do it on the spot so that we can keep our streets clear. So there are some definite advantages outside of cost that I think should also be considered by council.
And also preventative maintenance, so that there's an ongoing looking at the fleet, which is what I understood that this individual did for, that it wasn't simply looking at, an oil change versus an oil change. It's the actual entire vehicle service.
That's correct.
Can that be captured in a report?
Yes, absolutely.
Okay, thank you. Councilor
Yes, and I fully appreciate downtime costs money as well, and I would assume that would be part of the report. So, yes, I have no problem with that. It's just a matter of curiosity more than anything. I do have something in my mind that I think is right, but I just would like to see the numbers to verify.
Okay, thank you. Others to that point? Okay, so we'll look forward to that report. Anything further, Councilor Durley?
I have nothing.
That's nothing. I think I had Councilor Ribbiak, and then I have Councilor Kersey, and then Lane.
Mr. Mayor, I have two quick items for Mr. Mantle, if I may. Through you, item 7, with regard to the contract that's been awarded to Gobach Construction, that includes Martha Court. Are we still confident that that's going to be done this year?
Through you, Mr. Mayor, yes, we are. It'll be the last of the concrete work. It's the last project in the concrete tender, and they were supposed to start work today on our sidewalks and curb repairs. They'll be starting on Thursday of this week, but their schedule indicates that that's the last component of it. So you'll see it probably more near the end of November, I would think.
Thank you.
Mr. Mayor. Councilor.
Well, Mr. Mantle remains exceedingly confident, and I appreciate that very much. With regard to item 15, the Horton Municipal Drain, has that work commenced?
Mr. Mantle.
Through you, Mr. Mayor, I think the clerk has been notified by the drainage superintendent to arrange the startup meeting for that, and I think it's next week sometime. I think it's Thursday of next week.
Thank you very much. Those are my points, Mr. Mayor. Thank you.
Thank you, and I do want to acknowledge that there are a number of projects that Mr. Mantle has been overseeing, and the tenders awarded there too over the last month or so. So thank you, Mr. Mantle.
Welcome.
Councilor Kersey.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I had two questions regarding the Fenwick revitalization. I was out and did a drive through there over the weekend, actually this morning, and I had two concerns. One was that the road is quite washboarded, and the transition between the paved road and the gravel road is pretty abrupt. I wondered if it would be possible to have a grader go over that and also to put some extra stone there in the transition, just so that we don't attract any damage to our constituents' vehicles.
Look at that.
Yes, just as an update also, they're scheduled to start rough grading for the preparation for asphalt to go down this week, so you'll likely see it getting a lot smoother, and I think they have identified in their schedule paving next week.
Wonderful.
Music to my ears.
The second concern I would like to ask a question about, Mr. Mayor, has to do with the paving stones that are being put down and the process that's being followed to infill the little cracks between the stones. I wondered if Mr. Mantle could advise as to what kind of sand is being used there. Is it a standard type of sand, a landscape sand, or is it the polymeric sand that we've learned the hard way is really what's needed out there?
Mr. Mantle.
We have reviewed the tender documents. They indicate the polymeric sand is to be used.
Okay, perfect.
And it will be used, no doubt. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Mantle.
Councillor Lane.
Yes, thank you. On a different point through you, Mr. Mayor, to Mr. Mennel, and that is, maybe we could get an update on the flooding area in Fawn Hill and the illegal hookups that were discovered, and have there been more, or have any of the illegal ones been rectified? Just to kind of maybe give us an update on what's going on there.
Thank you. Mr. Mantle.
Through you, Mr. Mayor, the notices have gone out to all those homeowners that were found to be have these illegal connections. I overheard one at the counter today applying for his permit to replumb things. So, and I've already had discussions with one of the other individuals inquiring as to contractors that do that sort of work. So it's proceeding along.
Okay, thank you. And in terms of, I think the second part of Councillor Lane's question was about the process moving forward and identifying in the other part of the sewer shed?
Yes, that tender has been awarded to Dynamic Industrial Services, and they're prepared to, they'll probably start this week with flushing sewers and video inspections, that sort of thing. So they were calling today wondering about plans and schedules and that sort of thing.
Okay, thank you. Councillor Lane, anything?
No, that's fine, thank you.
Okay, and I think there were, I forget which report it was, but whether it was the treasurer's report or your report, Mr. Mantle, that there's the number of those that participated in the incentive program. It was 13 or 16? It's 21 now, the CAO says? Okay, very good. Others to Mr. Mantle's report? Thank you. I'm just going to build on what was talked about in terms of the, I guess it's toward the end of the report, constituent concerns and the issues arising. Again, tree trimming 3, dead tree 7, disease tree 1. When they're listed here, Mr. Mantle, are these completed? Are these requested? I guess what I'm looking for is more of a dashboard. So we had this many requests for, there was a dead tree 7. When are we getting to those? Have we gotten to them? Have we completed them? Tree hazards, etc. Mr. Mantle?
With respect to trees, each one's inspected at the time of the request is made. If it's found to be an immediate hazard, it's dealt with immediately. Like if there's a danger of damage to vehicles or pedestrians, that sort of thing, it'll be dealt with immediately. If it's simply a dead ash tree that just passed away due to the emerald ash borer, it's not going to fall down immediately, and the resident who made the initial contact will be notified that, or they should be notified that when the tree will be removed, that it's not a hazard, and as soon as the crews are available, because they're working steady on tree removals. So again, it's all based on priorities, which is the worst, and what needs to be dealt with first.
Thank you. I guess what I'm looking for, maybe the CAO can chime in on this, is sort of a metric on this. Where are we at with the public service request? And it's building on what Councillor Papp said earlier about PSR and the discussion we had. So we've had these public service requests or call in from members of the public or whatever. Are we meeting the customer service standard or not? Are we green? Are we go? Are we yellow? Are we red? No, we haven't met it. Mr. CAO, can that be incorporated into these reports somehow?
Yes, Mr. Mayor, there is metrics on the back end of PSR. One of the things, though, to let council know is the part of the performance management project this year included customer service standards for all departments that are due at the end of the year. So we have, in some cases, customer service standards, but in a lot of cases we don't. And the way PSR is designed to work is that you have to put that benchmark in place for the system to work optimally, and we haven't done that yet because they haven't been developed. So that was the whole strategy behind getting the standards done, so that we could benchmark if we're meeting a standard. But right now it's impossible to if we don't have one. So it's a bigger picture. However, I certainly can show council the metrics on PSR, how many are open, closed, the status, those sorts of things.
I think it's important to know so that we can continue to monitor it and not get into this specific tree or that specific tree, but rather general overall to know whether the resources that we have here in the town are meeting the needs of and the requests of the community. So some sort of reporting of the metrics of meeting these requests and requests from the community, I think, is important. So that may take you a month or two to get to in terms of getting it back to us, but I think it'd be helpful. Thank you. Anything further on? Councilor Papp, do you have something else?
Oh, I always like to add a sense of humor, and I want to personally thank Mr. Mano, and I know you got rid of the screecher on top of the arena that we had listened to for years, and that was great. You resolved it, and I'm very happy about that. And I know I believe all the residents that are walking the dog, they'll tell me the same thing. It's so quiet now, they fall asleep walking the dog because they can't believe that there's such a. And then on a very macro level, and I guess this is a joint question to, I guess, Mr. CEO and yourselves, and it's something that we can. You got a lot of projects on the go. And you got a lot of stuff that you got to get done here before the end of the year. And I guess I'm looking towards the Treasury. Mr. CEO, is there some point in the next few weeks where we would get some sense of what is going to be actually completed and funded and allocated? Or, to give us a sense of, is there any projects that need to be carried over? And you don't have to answer that now, but I just looking through the list. But if there's a confidence level that we'll get most of it done, then that's great. But I'm seeing a lot of stuff here that is under budget, over budget, on target, so can I safely assume that we'll get most of it done?
Let's answer that. Mr. CEO?
Our expectation is 100% of the work.
Okay, well, that's what I want to know, because some years that's happened where we've not completed stuff. It's not anybody's fault, but we had to carry it over and accrue it in the following year. Okay, that's great. Thank you, Mr. Mayor.
Okay,
Thank you, Mr. CEO.
Any others? Good discussion. Thank you, Mr. Mantle. I'm going to call the question. All those in favor? Any opposed? That motion's carried, and that includes those staff direction.
Actually, don't have you
Thank you.
retiring.
It's been moved by Councillor Kersey, second by Councillor Papp. Committee of the Whole receive the October 2014 Community Planning and Development Services Report for information. There's some metrics there, sorry, in terms of applications, etc. Councillor Papp?
Just quickly, 30 seconds. I love the turnaround time. We're hearing real good feedback, I can tell you, from those that are applying individually, corporations, and that's a lot to be said to you, and your whole department. It's really great news. Good to hear.
Others? Can we hear an update about the downtown master plan? There is some reference in this document about that. I don't know whether Mr. Glover would answer this or the CAO or Mr. CAO.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. The report that the directors put in is accurate. However, some new information has come to my attention. I admit I'd been a little dismissive of it at first, but I had a meeting with one of the members of the Downtown Beautification Committee members, Peace Park Committee members, etc., who had some interesting analysis on the existing master plan. I had a conversation this morning with Mr. Palmer with regards to some of these issues that have been raised, and he did confirm some of my questions. For example, is it the best design move to punch the road through on Churchill through the convenience store, which has been a widely held belief as far as it's necessary for the development of or the implementation of the master plan. The comment to me was, my question was, okay, so that's something that I've always accepted as being part of the best design to achieve the results of the master plan. Is that true, or was it more of a case of there was a problem, somebody said let's punch the road through, everyone agreed, and then Ron was giving his marching orders on that premise? He indicated to me that he felt that it wasn't the best design solution, and that in fact it was the recommendation of the committee, and he was working with that recommendation, or more accurately how Harold Matty was at the time. So it's raised some concerns with me. I know that there is the town has an option on one of the properties that the town may be asked to deal with that option sooner than we expected, which raises some questions about the master plan, and I've asked Ron to take a second look at it prior to it coming to council. Our intention was to have it come for the inclusion in the official plan so that it became encoded, but I don't want to do that if it's a flawed plan, and I want to take the opportunity to talk to Ron. I have a meeting with him Friday to review it. He's going to make some changes to soften the punching the road through, which he called a bit of a harsh alternative, and it may be something that is, as far as it being a primary first step, it may be something that is recommended as more like a 20-year or 30-year out step, depending on how the downtown matures, and let the existing block as it stands now redevelop and densify on its own rather than trying to put that road through. So that's one example of some questions I have. Once those are resolved, certainly we'll be coming back to council to present it to you.
Well, maybe you can keep us updated on that, Mr. CEO. Thank you for that. Any further discussion regarding the director's report? There being none, I call the question. All those in favor? Any opposed? That motion is carried. Thank you. Lots of work there as well, so thank you very much. It's been moved by Councillor Kersey, seconded by Councillor Papp. The Committee of the Whole received the October 2014 Fire and Bylaw Services Report for information. Discussion. Thank you for the graphics. There being none, I call the question. All those in favor? Any opposed? The motion is carried. Congratulations again to the fire service on the successful opening of Station 3. It's been moved by Councillor Papp, seconded by Councillor Kersey. Committee of the Whole received the October 2014 Recreation, Culture and Wellness Department Report for information. Councillor Durling.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. At paragraph 4, it's interesting to me that the call for additional prime ice time is constant, which staff is unable to accommodate due to unavailability. As illustrated many times in the past, the demand for ice time exceeds the supply. So it's interesting to note that people are still trying to get some ice time at our facilities. So again, if we can keep this in mind as we move forward, it's valuable information, I think.
Thank you very much. Others? Just to that, Madam Director, about the, there's some new public skating times. Can you outline those for us? And an additional 2 hockey skill drop-in sessions. Can you just identify that quickly for us?
We have 2 additional after-school skates from 4 to 5 on Tuesdays and Thursdays. As well, we had the opportunity through actually the Junior Bees, their trainer, he offered to be on the ice to offer any drop-in for hockey skills, and it's a charge the same as Shani, and that's during the day, and that's going very well as well, and that's twice a week.
Okay, thank you. Others to the director's report? Just, Ms. Van Ravensway, regarding the Communities in Bloom Committee and the community garden, I did get some feedback from one of the neighbors. I think I forwarded you that email. They were concerned about the location and the how close it might be to their property and potential impacts on water. Has there been a resolution at that, or are you still working on that?
Yes. I've contacted the neighbor and I assured them that we would be working with them when the community garden is placed. At this point, we're looking at 2015. We're walking the committee through a memorandum of understanding between the three groups to understand, who is going to be involved in what. And the next Communities in Bloom meeting is, I believe, the 19th of November, and they'll be walking through that. So for sure, the area property owners will be contacted, and I'm sure we can work through anything.
Thank you very much. Look forward to, pleased to hear that and look forward to seeing some resolution on that. Thank you. Anything further for the Recreation, Culture, and Wellness? There being none, I call the question. All those in favor? Any opposed? That motion is carried. It's been moved by Councillor Lane, second by Councillor Durley, that Committee of the Whole receive the October 2014 Clerk's Department report for information. Congratulations, Madam Clerk, on running. It's added on to the work that you do, but putting together a municipal election. There's much in this report about the summary of that, and so thank you very much on behalf of council and all candidates for running that election. Any further questions, comments for the clerk? Councilor Rubiak?
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Through you to the clerk, just wanted to make note of your commentary, if I can remember it, with regard to the turnout and looking at programming or something to encourage a greater turnout next time out. I think that's an important objective for us to take, I think, as council. We don't know exactly what it is that we can help to support an awareness within the population that the bigger the turnout, the better the result. And so if there's something that you're planning on doing or investigating over the next couple or 3 years, then I know I'd be interested in hearing about it, and I'd be interested in being able to assist in formulating whatever it is that we can do as council to support that. I think we had a really interesting campaign. It's very difficult, very interesting times. I won't say difficult. You would have thought that this would have been an election where the turnout would have been greater than ordinary, but it wasn't. And so I'd be interested in as a town taking on, to some extent, the objective of ensuring that our turnouts are greater than they have been, and perhaps the best anywhere. But thank you. The work was excellent, and it just 44% turnout just seemed a little for me.
Thank you. Councillor Durley?
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Just building on that, the last part of the report, looking toward 2018, indicates some ways that the Clerk's Department, and that we can explore ways to bring this up. And I'm just wondering if we should look at adding a little to the budget so that this can be explored a little further, or is this premature? It is stating that a recommendation report will come in later on, but it's looking forward, and again, the clerk indicates that one election's over and the next one starts. So if in fact we could, give a little bit of budget to her in order to explore this idea, if that would be something we should consider at the 2015 budget time. So.
Okay. Thank you. Do you want to comment, Madam Clerk?
Through you, Mr. Mayor, yes, there are some things that we will be looking at, such as some form of mail-in ballot. I wouldn't recommend going directly with a vote by mail at this point in time, because it would mean a complete overhaul of the equipment that we do own. But I will be looking at a form of mail-in ballot that will enhance the proxy voting opportunities that we have right now. There are some other things that we are going to explore. As I have noted before, we plan for a party with 100% turnout and are happy to get 50%. So we send the invitations out to 100, and if we get 50 back, we're happy. This was a bit of a lower turnout, but on another note, the expansion of the advanced voting opportunity to 3 different times was exceptional this year, and we did see a double the amount of turnout, particularly in the Ward 1 advanced poll station that we had this year. So that has been very successful. Some of the initiatives that we've undertaken in the past 4 years have been have had some excellent results. So we will still keep continuing to review that, and I will come back with some recommendations in the future.
Thank you. Anything further?
No, thank you.
Any others? Councillor Papp?
Just building on this as well, I would like to take it to another level as well. Aside from some of the recommendations, we'll look forward to that, Madam Clerk. May be worthwhile for us at some point through Mr. CEO to do a How Might We session with maybe Dr. David Siegel to discuss people's involvement and understanding of what local government is and why they should be voting. I don't mean now, but it was quite evident, and if you watched, that voter turnout in an adjacent community here was down to almost 1/3. And, it goes to show, and let's not look at it negatively, but just figure out why is it, do people understand why we're here? Do they know what the issues were? Yes, I agree, Councilor Rubiak, I would have thought there would have been a higher turnout, but there's other reasons. Maybe worth a good educational session to involve, I'm just using him as an example, to walk through and say what kinds of things can we do along with the technical areas of improving our, because we're preaching citizen engagement, right? Participation of everybody coming in. So part of that also means is forgive me for using this, but sort of a mentoring and a succession plan, we want to call it, that there are candidates ready and well prepared, that when they enter into the race, they understand at least the basics of it and understand the issues. And I think it's important for them, in fairness to them. So this is something that has been on the back of my head for years. And I know that I can use my past, I can share with you when I did do some of that training with municipal administration program, half the people that attended were private citizens who went on to elections because they understood the basic concepts and knew what they were getting involved in. The others were staff. So maybe this is the time for us to be a little bit more active, and I'm not looking for any sort of, but maybe that's a discussion we can have as we start moving into the new term and engage our university here. Particularly, we have a very, very excellent person in Dr. Siegel, and he did a great job at the debate. I mean, this man does know his stuff, and maybe that's something we can work with and other experts. Just a thought.
Okay. Thank you. I'm going to comment as well. I think what I find interesting is one of the comments that the clerk has put in the report, and that is regarding the list, because we say it's 44% of the list. But what if the list is wrong? Or what if the list isn't wholly accurate, which I think the clerk is sort of saying in some respects here that it's difficult for MPAC to track, etc. So I think part of the solution might be to tighten up the list a little bit more, because we do rely on that level. Is the list off by a few percentage points of the number of people that moved out of the community, and those that moved in are added, but what about those that have moved off? So, I would think as well, in addition to what's been recommended by councillors, looking at that list and making sure that it is the most accurate list possible will help us, because maybe that number is higher if the list is actually more accurate. So those are my thoughts on it.
Just a quick note, we are looking at revisiting the strategic plan. I think this is an element that would fit into that very nicely. And
As a
we can
governance.
develop some goals on that.
Under government point. Great point.
Madam Clerk?
Yes, just about the voters list. We have been brainstorming in our department how we can make improvements as well, and it may be through using some of the tools already available to the municipality through house sales and that sort of thing. But the area clerks will be meeting with the Municipal Property Assessment Corporation and expressing some of our concerns that we've had, and maybe try and encourage them to continue with a door-to-door enumeration, or a better form of enumeration than what they did this year, which was not even a targeted one. It was more just allowing people to look up their own information as opposed to reaching out. So we're looking at ways to reach out to the public in the future. We did the market visits this election, which were successful, but we would like to maybe expand that to other areas of the municipality, other events, that sort of thing, once we get the voters list after Labor Day. So we are looking at some things on how we can improve that list for everyone's sake as well.
And I think it does impact, as you mentioned just before, it does also impact the spending limits, because the spending limits are based on a list, and is the list too high, or is it the right number? So, thank you. Councillor Ribbiak, you had your comment already?
I did.
Okay, so we can include that, and if you could bring that to that strategic planning session as we move forward. Anything further on the clerk's report? Again, on behalf of council and all candidates, thank you very much for running a very professional election for our community. Thank you. Going to call the question. All those in favor? Any opposed? That motion is carried. It's been moved by Councillor Durley, seconded by Councillor Papp. The Committee of the Whole received the October 2014 Chief Administrative Officer's Report for information. Questions, comments on the CO's report? We covered a lot of it earlier. Councillor Kersey, go ahead, sir.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I'd like to refer to item 12, and one particular line in that section that refers not necessarily to Kunda Park, but to jurisdictional issues extending into the East Fawn Hill that could extend or impact on the private sectors. And I guess I'm looking for clarity, because I thought as we went through the East Fawn Hill planning process that the MPCA was involved in that process and expressed their position on all of those provincially significant wetlands and woodlots, et cetera, and now to the implication that I'm reading in here, maybe I'm reading too much into your report, Mr. CAO, is that they're going to extend their jurisdiction even further and may impede the development that they've already approved.
Mr. CAO?
Correct. Absolutely correct, Mr. Mayor. There is concern that's been raised by a number of the different property owners that the MPCA had a role to play over the last decade, has not raised significant concerns, and if they have been raised and been dealt with. Now the planning has all been put into place. They're starting to throw a lot of, they're starting to threaten to put a lot of conditions on property that's already been, that's gone through the planning process. So there is definitely concern in that area with regards to the potential impact that it could have on development.
As a follow-up, Mr. Mayor, through you to CAO, is there a role for the municipality to play, albeit it's impacting private developers? We played a significant role in getting it to the place that it's at. What role do you envision that we as a municipality could play to push back, if you will, against the MPCA's new position on these developments? Is there a role, and have we consulted legal on what role we might play?
Well, to use the one example of the development in my report, it has an impact on the town with regards to parkland dedication and parkland development. So, you know, if we're unable to proceed in this particular, it's sort of this, I view this as kind of a test case, if you will. We've got a subdivision agreement on existing parkland dedication that we feel that we should be able to go ahead and develop. The developer feels that way as well. The NPCA had, and M&R had slapped a bunch of conditions on the park. I have consulted legal, and the response is that if there was no subdivision agreement on it, they have every jurisdiction, every right to put those conditions on. But because the subdivision agreement has been approved and the appeal period has ended, that therefore concludes the planning process, so that you can't come back after the fact and put conditions on a property that's already got planning approval. We did have a meeting with MPCA last week, and they at first took the position that these are our conditions, take them or leave them, and there's nothing you can do about it. And we pushed hard enough that they've now said we will present our position in writing, and they have confirmed that they will look at it again. And I've specifically asked MPCA to provide their legal justification for the conditions, so that we have a clear understanding of where they stand. And if they don't have a legal position, they have no jurisdiction, and we should go ahead and start development.
As a further follow-up, Mr. Mayor, then, so in that particular case, I understand the stance that you're taking, because the assumption is that there was an approved plan of subdivision or draft plan or what have you. With the East Fawn Hill lands, with very few exceptions, there are no draft plans of subdivision there, right? And even though they've had 10 years or 12 years to comment on all of this, and presumably they did to some degree, I saw some of the commentary that they made along the way, they're now still in a position to legally demand conditions above and beyond what they put forward already.
That's correct.
And we have no legal position, no legal standing to push back.
We can certainly push back. It depends on the extent of the conditions. And for example, one of the conditions is a 3-year endangered species survey, where you have to look for endangered animals over a 3-year period to ensure that, you know, your site doesn't have any 3-ringed skinks or bobolinks or any other exotic species, so that if three-striped skink, thank you. So that if your site, you know, it can be shown that you don't have endangered species on it. The legislation is pretty strong on that particular case. Provincially significant wetlands is another area that the province has been fairly aggressive on. Other communities like Fort Erie have had considerable problems with PSWs and development. So I'm not saying that our hands are tied, but they do have jurisdiction, and you know, it's going to be interesting to see how far they take this issue. We're not exactly clear of, you know, how far they're willing to push their jurisdiction. So.
Thank you for the clarity on that, Mr. Reese.
Thank you. I think I'm just going to build on what the CEO said in terms of our own development and the draft plan of subdivision. You'll recall that when we considered it, there was one letter from the NPCA, and then about 3 days later, there was another letter from the NPCA about, I believe it was a butternut tree or something that.
Yeah.
So it felt in that case that the ground was shifting, and it appears in other cases the ground may be shifting as well. So it's important to keep following up on. Councillor Papp?
Yeah, and I'll quickly, I appreciate, Mr. CEO. I think you need to keep us involved, because I'm really concerned. I'm not just speaking for myself, but all of us, that if some of these things end up blocking or delaying, and some of it cannot be substantiated, and if there are legal remedies, I'll leave that up to you to check with our advisors, because I'm not too sure about. And I'm not going to comment, whatever they say their jurisdiction is, I would challenge their jurisdiction and say, how far can you take this? Because the last thing you want is exactly what you described in other communities, where projects now, and particularly one community, they're suing for mega millions because they were held up. So we're not going to get stuck in a bit after all the work that went into this. So I'll be positive and say that you'll work it through and keep us constantly advised, because there is a ground shifting there, I can tell you, a major one, and the mayor and I have talked about this as well. And the last thing we need is more and more of this sort of restrictive control that puts us in a position where we're defending ourselves, whereas we think we put together a pretty good project. Fair to say?
Yeah, absolutely. Thank you. Any others on that topic? Any others on other topics from the CEO's report?
No.
There being none, I'm going to call the question. All those in favor? Any opposed? That motion's carried. It has been moved by Councillor Rybak, second by Councillor Drilley. This regular meeting of Committee of the Whole be adjourned until the next regular committee scheduled for Monday, November 17th, 2014, unless sooner called by the mayor. All those in favor? Any opposed? That motion is carried. This meeting is adjourned. We'll take a brief break before we go into closed session. Thank you.